is this all a setup for telling me what you don't like about Linkin Park?
No.
This is the thing, right? This is like the thing you don't like about high def video is the exact same thing you don't like about everything I've ever made. That's the same. It's the same reason, right?
Listen, we're going to officially start this interview now. Okay, and let's get it out of the way. Okay, because I have a lot of questions to ask you. But 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Tear me the fuck apart.
Why?
I'm giving you the space to do it now, so that we could get into your new work as we're talking and everything.
What? I've had 20 years of let's give me the benefit of like the first year being a lot of like people building the band up. So let's call it like 18 to 19 years of people shitting on the band. Like just being like, because you can't give a band who just had the biggest album on the planet a good review. Like you have to pick apart every stupid little thing that they've ever said or done and tell them why they don't deserve to be as big as their band is. And if you had asked us, we had made our first album in like our apartments. So like in our heads, we weren't the biggest band in the world. We were like, why are they being so fucking mean? And so I'm used to it. I have so much experience getting beat up. You can't beat me up. Like you said crazy shit about some of our music. And the reason I know that, and I don't say crazy meaning it was wrong. I just mean it was like, oh, that was aggressive. And I went back and I listened to it and I went, wow, that was actually more aggressive than I thought it was. It wasn't like all out mean. I've heard meaner things. But it was like, oh yeah, this is going to be why does he even want to talk? Because like, it seems like it just seemed weird. I was like, so why in the world, why did you want to do this interview? Because I got the request through management or the publicist of the label.
Well, I got the request through my guy at Twitch. He's like, would you like to talk to Mike Shinoda? I was like, why would Mike want to talk to me? He's probably under the impression I hate all of his fucking music. And
I kind of was. And then fans on Twitter were like, no, he doesn't hate everything. So let's start there. And by the way, when I did a little bit of research, I immediately was like, we can't hate each other because death grips.
That is true.
That's right away. I was like, that's one reason.
True. That is true. I mean, yeah, I remember, I can't even remember how many years ago it was, but yeah, there were tons of people like showing me that picture of you on stage. It was like, he's rocking a Death Grip shirt. I was like, I mean, that doesn't entirely surprise me because of the way that Linkin Park incorporated elements of metal and also noise and electronic music and hip hop, and Death Grips does a lot of that, but with a much more experimental and grimy bent. I mean, what I think a lot of people, and this is something I was going to ask you about anyway, are sort of starting to slowly realize as they go back and listen to a lot of the earlier records is that a lot of the interesting genre fusions that seem so popular today, you guys were so ahead of the curve on with your early stuff. And as you look at this new generation, this new crop of artists coming up now, personally, in an artistic way, does it almost feel like looking into a mirror?
Oh, I think a lot of, when I hear new stuff that I like, and there is like a weird play of like, do I like it because our DNA is like in a tiny bit? Like that's a weird,
which I think is a fair reason to like something. If you manage to be that successful.
If I'm being, I'm very almost like, maybe it's good to be that self-aware. Maybe that's a good thing. Because without that, then you get surprised by things that are like, oh, actually, you're just being egotistical. I think for me, the way I look at that is that certainly we were lucky. Certainly we had a vision of what our DNA was supposed to look like from the moment that by the time we released the first record, like up until that point, we were developing it. And even this year we put out a box set of Hybrid Theory. And the whole point of that really was like management had come to me and said, we're talking about putting out this box set re-release of Hybrid Theory. And I was like, why? Like we've done everything there is to do with Hybrid Theory. Why would you do that? And then once we started digging up like cool little components of, or I should say like we were digging up demos that hadn't been released and we found video footage from the time. And it was stuff from 98 and like, I think it was like 97, 98, 99. And in seeing and hearing that stuff, I was like, wow, this is first of all, stuff that fans haven't seen. Second of all, it's stuff that it really shows that the DNA of the band, like the kind of philosophy of how to merge genres and just the stuff we liked. It was just like, these are the weird things that we like. Like, what does it sound like when a band who doesn't know how to do this tries to put together Deftones and Portishead and the Roots and Aphex Twin? Like, those things don't make any sense together. And people ask us, what are your favorite groups, or what are your references or whatever, and we'd say those things, and they just look at us like that's. First of all, most people didn't even know who those bands were. Second of all, if they did, they were like, "I don't understand. What do you mean? I don't even hear that in your music."
Yeah,
so why are you saying
for
that?
A lot of people, like, that put you guys creatively in a really weird cross section, because people who would normally be into those groups are typically really snooty when it comes to metal music across the board. And then you're talking about the metal press, who is like completely ignorant to sort of like the origins of any of those artists or like the scenes that their music comes from.
The metal press has changed very little in the last 20 years. They are the same. I mean, 30 years. Like they are the same, fundamentalists that they've always been. And you can hate that and be like, well, that genre is just never evolving. Or there is actually a beauty to that. Like, there is a sense of like, I appreciate the fact, I remember being like a 16, 17-year-old. And when I loved a group and then I'd see their sticker on some idiot's folder, I'd love the group less. Like, it was not the group's fault. And I do it because that's just like how my brain worked and how we acted as kids. And it was immature, but there is something like, it's a little noble. Like, there's a little bit, it's like Jiro dreams of sushi. Like, you're just going to do the exact same thing a million times you're so good at it. And maybe I appreciate it because I could never be that person. I could never do the exact same thing over and over and over to get that good at it. I have to do different things.
Do you think, speaking of the comments that you were just kind of making about the evolution of the metal press and also just like perceptions of the popularity of artists as a young music fan, do you feel like any of that has shifted for the positive in the internet age? I mean, I know that at least as someone who's now deep into my 30s, like these conversations around like who's a sellout and who isn't and da-da-da-da-da have mostly kind of washed out. I mean, granted, a lot of those conversations have now been replaced by conspiratorial, like tinfoil hat industry plant type shit, but do you feel like with the whole like accusation of selling out thing and authenticity and not liking something because other people like it, do you feel like that's less of a factor?
I think it's less of a factor, and like, I don't pay any attention to like the conspiracy part of it, because that's just like, I think that's just like, I don't know, it's a small group of people coming up with weird reasons to think the way they think. And the other thing is too, like there are people who are moving things forward in those same lanes. Like, just the fact that that Poppy has become what she's become, and like, what's that dude's name? Is it Ghostmane or Ghostamane? Yeah, do you know what I'm saying? Like, that whole thing, somebody sent me, God, what was her name? There's just like, by listening to the music, it's like kind of like shoegazy pop, but then you see her image and she's super goth. Who's that girl? Do you know this one?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I should say the name. I should know the name. It's somebody just emailed me about. Anyway, the point is, I don't want to like go down this weird like music critic like genre thing. What you had asked earlier was like, how do I relate to genre blending and bending in music now? Like, if I think right now, like there was a point at which genre meant a lot, and now genre means nothing. Like I think it's just like if you start talking about genre, that's why I get frustrated with what we were just talking about. It's because I don't actually care. I don't really care at all about what genre a thing is. I just want to listen to what I want to listen to based on my mood and really just based on mood.
I think these days genre, I think it still matters in good ways, but I think it matters less in bad ways because, I mean, again, I remember along with a lot of these genre labels back in the day would also come cultural barriers with which like people were not likely to cross because I don't know or I don't understand or I don't care for whatever group of people or scene is attached to that, and I don't want to transition over to that in order to like this or understand it or get a hold of it. And now with just easier access to the internet, like all these kids are sort of seeing these different genres on a level playing field and listening to it and digesting it all almost like in an equal fashion, which I think makes these genre blends that you guys were sort of, ahead of the curve on, so much more likely today. It makes a poppy possible. It makes, also like a 100 Gex possible. I mean, which, they just did the remix of, that track with you guys. And I know there are a lot of, fans of their stuff in the chat today. Would you be able to go a little bit into what exactly like made that crossover happen?
Yeah. Oh, the Gex. I just kept seeing Dylan's
everywhere.
credit.
He just is everywhere.
The first time I noticed it was on a track, oh God, I'm really going to blank on the guy's name right now. Tony Velour. Do you hear that track?
I think we played it.
It was like, he was listed as a collaborator. It was like by the two of them. And I'm like, who's this Dylan kid? And I loved that track. I thought it was so cool. And it was, for him, it was just the tip of the iceberg. It wasn't even one of his most like adventurous tracks, right? So then that was great because like once I figured out who he was, I found out about 100 Gex, then all of a sudden there was all this like really experimental material that was there waiting for me. And I eventually, when we started talking about doing some remixes by younger artists, newer artists of old Linkin Park stuff, again, my initial reaction was like, it has to be just right, you guys. Like if you try and go out there and try and make a big like pop dance remix album out of Hybrid Theory, I won't stand for it. That would be terrible. And the guy who was kind of heading it up at the label, he and I started talking music and really connected. Like it was like we were talking about Umru and we were talking about like Kiro Bonito actually, which was a really weird one. Blood Orange and 100 Gex and like some just really interesting takes on the stuff. And some of it has worked out. Some of it is in conversation still. Some of it didn't work out. But that's, to be truth be told, that's like more what I listen to these days.
No, I mean, I think that's where a lot of, at least, just as somebody who's just following this stuff every day, that's like where a lot of the youth's focus and energy is going as far as like what's cutting edge and what's like actually bubbling up into something with a lot of momentum in the underground. That just sort of seems where a lot of the energy is right now in this bubblegum bass and this hyperpop stuff. That just sort of seems where a lot of it is. But simultaneously, it does seem like, as you mentioned, Poppy, there is sort of a revolution going on in some sections of the metal community. I mean, even Code Orange, for example, like I think a lot of their stuff is almost like the next logical step past like a lot of what Linkin Park was doing back in the day, because it's so digital and it's so heavy and it's so glitchy and it feels like really propulsive and massive and muscular like a metalcore album should be, but simultaneously it's so Fear Factory at the same time too.
Oh, that's funny. I think it's like there's this weird with some of those, if they get it right, they kind of, there's an element of like suspension of disbelief in terms of like the lowbrow nature of it, right? Like since I went to school for illustration and graphics, and I loved the juxtaposition of opposites and things that didn't belong together or hadn't been put together. And you know, as you get older, I think you get a little more sophisticated about that and you notice it in things. And I love some of the things that I love have that one of the reasons why we were talking about like the when things feel too crisp or they feel too polished or whatever, like I'm becoming more aware of that when I did my self-titled the post-traumatic record a couple years ago, the label had to like start talking me out of doing shooting my own videos for it, because they appreciated the intent of like everything had to be hyper personal, but at a certain point the comment was, Mike, we're just sick of staring up your nose. Like, you got to do videos like your camera is only 2 feet from your face, and it's like you have this tendency to like drop your hand and we're like looking up your nose, and it's like at a certain point like the fidelity is just too low. Like we don't want to go up to like up here. It doesn't need to look like a J Balvin video. It just needs to like, got to get it right in the middle, and that's how we started, you know, changing some of the visuals to it. That's like true for, you know, that's true for music too. Like I think when you're young and just getting started, as your tool set gets sharper and you get more tools, and then at a certain point, you make a place where people make mistakes is they want to increase the like production value or the fidelity of their recording or their songwriting, and in when they get it right, they get it right, but when they get it wrong, it's either because they went like too high fidelity, and that could mean too pop. It could just mean too clean. I can hear too much or too whatever, or they're scared to go there and they don't go far enough. So it really is about finding just the right balance. And I think some of the records that I've loved so much over the years are the ones where they do just find that right balance of making it like showing off their craftsmanship while keeping some of the like spastic, accidental, dirty moments. They don't lose those in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's sort of I guess a direction for the creative process in general that is so high risk, but also so high reward if you can actually nail it, because you end up in a place where you have successfully ridden that cutting edge. And nobody can really kind of take that away from you. You know, there's something certainly to be said for, you know, sticking to what works and maybe finding different ways to innovate upon that. But, you know, I think if you are able to, I guess, successfully, you know, do exactly what you said, I mean, the benefits can certainly be long term. And, you know, having said that, though, I do also want to talk about some of the stuff that you're working on right now. Like as of right now with this new track, Happy Endings, which I would love for you to go in detail with, but also, you know, with your Dropped Frame series that you just kind of went through in 2020, like where do your ambitions for your own music kind of stand right now?
I'm in a really weird place. It's a fun, weird. So everybody's so used to the idea of artists pumping out material. And actually, like, I feel like one thing that people, because there's so much music out there, it's if you haven't read I mean, have you ever read The Long Tail, the book? So The Long Tail is an oldish book. It's like, I don't know, 15 years old maybe or something at this point. And it was written about the time when like eBay and Amazon, like after they were already world dominating, brands, ecosystems, how that changed the way we consume stuff. Like because it went from, if you wanted to buy a thing, you'd go into a store and there were limited options on the shelves, and that was constrained by the four walls, brick and mortar. And then all of a sudden, as we all know, it became digital, and especially things that were natively digital, like music, you could have infinite options. So guys like you became more important because they helped people sift through the options, right? The playlisting became the new radio, and all of those things were happening. The reason they call it the long tail is because that means that instead of it being like a triangular kind of like, up here is Michael Jackson and down here is somebody else who's like still like selling records, but they're like here. Everybody else is outside the building. Nobody else gets to be on the shelf. So all of a sudden with Spotify, the tail goes forever. Every single artist ever gets a few spins. So everybody's making some money. Everybody's getting some reward for, I made a thing. Like, should I keep making it? And there are some people on the other end of the equation going, yes, we like it. Like, please make more. And then you've got the Weeknd and the Beyonce at the top of the thing, right? So why was I saying that? Oh, because you were asking about drop frames. So I stepped out of a lot of that rat race. Like after having done the post-traumatic thing, I realized, okay, there's a amorphous emotional component to, if I made a song in 2015 and I put it out, the metrics by which you were judging it, like a fan hears it and they go, do I like this song? Do I want to listen to this song? It was more about like their relationship with Linkin Park and their relationship with what the new song sounded like. That was really the equation, right? Like those are the things that were in play. All of a sudden, there's this third element of like the emotional connection to Chester and what Linkin Park means or meant, or it was this weird, uncomfortable, weird thing. And as I was going through the whole process, I was like, I just didn't like that being part of the equation. It made me really like it just didn't feel good. So I did that album, that post-traumatic album, which was it was just as much for the fans as it was for me. It was like, I want to do something that creates like closure, gets my feelings out there. Maybe you relate to it, maybe you don't. And then just do my tour, say thank you in person to as many people as I can, and then go home and stop. And so I got on Twitch at the start of quarantine. I started making these I basically started just like making a new thing every day. So 5 days a week from 10 to noon, I make something from scratch with occasional breaks, but like 90% of the time I'm like making a thing from scratch. And many of those things were instrumental. Almost all of them were instrumental because again, I didn't want to put my voice on things. I felt like that put an undue pressure on it. I wanted to be clear. And plus I like instrumental music. So I wanted to make instrumental music. And a lot of it's a little jokey, memey, goofy shit. But some of it's not.
It seems like you almost like.
Thank you for cutting off my.
Well, no, I was just going to add. It seemed almost like by the third volume you were just like getting a little tongue in cheek with it.
There was a lot of stuff. Well, that's the thing is like, what is Twitch? Like Twitch is like a really tight community of people who spend a lot of time. Like if you spend a lot of time in like a little small space, it ends up being a ton of inside jokes. It's so many, and a lot of it's just inside jokes. So like somebody else listens to it and be like, okay, that's like an instrumental track. I don't care. My Twitch community listens to it and goes like, I remember the joke that got made that created that sound that's happening right now in that song.
I mean, as somebody who's essentially like a veteran of the music industry at this point, like for you creatively and personally, like what does it mean to have transitioned into this era where at one point everything that you do and everything that you record and release has to have such a huge process behind it, and so many gears turning, and like so much thought put into how is it going to be in context of this and that and the other thing, and will it sell as much as the last record, and so on and so forth. And now you're at this point where you're just like, I'm just going to drop I'm going to record this, and I'm going to drop it onto the internet in a matter of days, and blah. You like it, you don't, you don't. Bam.
I love that. Oh my God. I mean, now I'm used to it. When I first started doing that fast turnaround thing, or like in the case of Twitch, it's instantaneous. Like I make a thing, it's out there, and people like, rip it and listen to it. Like they're like literally just putting clips of it on YouTube and like, go listen to that. There's a wiki page of like that catalogs every single instrument, every single song I've done on Twitch for the whole year. It's over 100 entries long. You were talking about the process of it too. I know that a lot of actually a good cross section of the people that watch my Twitch channel are music makers. So what's fun about that is I do get like, responses and DMs, and on Twitch there's whispers and stuff like that. Talking about being an artist, like hey, I have a question. Like I'm from like, hey, I'm a vocalist. I need to do my first, like I only work with this shitty mic, and now I need to upgrade, and I finally have enough money to like buy like a semi-professional setup. Like what should I get? To like, I'm writing a song. I don't usually write this way. What do you recommend for my DAW? What do you recommend for these plugins? What do you recommend for my songwriting? How do you come up with ideas? Like I'm in this slump. What do I do? I need to put my stuff out. All those things, right? Like I don't strive for like, I'm not drawn to being like, hey, put me on a stage. Like, let me talk to you and even feel important and stuff. But I do get a lot out of somebody feeling like they need something that I can provide them. And it's just a very simple, like, I need help. This thing. Can you tell me what about this thing? And I can tell them, and that feels great. And that's what I do, 5 days a week. That's really a big part of what I'm doing.
I mean, there's definitely a beauty to all of this, which you are putting on display through your Twitch page, through your work, through everything that you're explaining here, through the way your own creative process has transitioned over the past 20 years. But when taking into account, like in even bigger picture, not just like the wealth of resources and information that this digital revolution offers to musicians, when you think more about the business end of things, especially how a lot of that has been laid bare in the wake of the pandemic, do you think ultimately, as a result of all of this change, are artists actually getting the short end of the stick, a shorter end of the stick than maybe they were 20 years ago, or has it been a net positive?
I mean, the pandemic and quarantining, like people not being able to tour is like devastating. And you can't really hear people say that all the time, but you really can't overstate it. I was on a Zoom. Was it a Zoom? I was on something. Yeah, no, it was a Zoom with a bunch of folks from my like extended touring family, meaning like guitar techs and like production manager. Our production manager actually set it up. It was on their holiday times. Like just wanted to get people together. They were all around the world, and it was like over a dozen of us and just hanging out and catching up because we hadn't. And when I tell you that like my guitar tech from one of the tours, like he popped in mid stream or whatever, mid conversation, and he was working at a Verizon phone store. Like he was in a suit with a tie. I've never seen him in a suit. He was in like a suit with a tie. And he's like, hey guys, like I can't talk very long because I'm at work. And everyone was like, wait, where were you working? He's like, yeah, I'm selling phones. And I was fucking heartbroken. Like that made me so upset because this is a guy that lives on the road and he's really good at what he does. And he's an awesome human being. And I don't want to see him like, just like squeaking by on some job like that. That sucks. So I've been trying, like we support, if you look at some of our like Spotify pages and stuff, they'll let you put a charity that you support. And we in the band, and I don't know if they were able to implement it on my page, but it's Music Cares. There's a Music Cares COVID relief charity. And that's what that's for. That's the reason that we chose that thing, is to kind of help out folks who are it's not just artists, like, yeah, artists too. But there's a lot of folks that, like, because the artists aren't touring, like the crew can't tour, you know, that sucks.
And, I mean, outside of obviously like the thousands of jobs that are impacted just by not being able to tour, when you're looking at just like the business model in general of how music is consumed, I'm not even going to say sold, because most people aren't even buying music now.
Yeah, like, that's true.
You know, is that an across the board detriment to the way that I guess musicians are benefiting off of their craft? I mean, you know, you can say just as much as anybody, like if you go, you know, back in the day, it's not like you were making most of your money off of just CD sales anyway. You know what I mean? But
well, okay, that's actually interesting, because way back in the day, like on the first album, we were right on the cusp, on the like lucky side of the cusp of the Napster like explosion. So like we actually, on the first record, the reason Hybrid Theory is still like the biggest, what is it, the biggest debut of the millennium or something, I don't know whatever. The reason it's as big as it is because they still sold, everybody still bought CDs. They bought tons of CDs, and those, because the way the system is still evolving, like those counted for a lot. And when we got our Diamond awards, our trophies for Hybrid Theory, the label was like, you know, this is 10 million US only. Like you guys have sold, you know, I don't even know what it was, 30 something in the world. And they were like, just off one record, this will never happen again. Like they can change the numbers and say, oh, you know, streams are worth this much now, and like make it an equivalent or whatever, or a different digital to physical equivalent. But this will never happen again because of the timing. I think one thing that has changed culturally with your channels in particular, like it's a lot of people who really do love, who are passionate about music, who love to find music. Like that's where new stuff breaks, and meaning that's where stuff that's going to eventually be big gets found. But I think even more importantly, I think it's where artists who wouldn't otherwise be able to make a living doing what they do, that's where their core audience actually is, with you guys, right? So like a group like Death Grips, like if your ecosystem didn't exist, like Death Grips wouldn't be able to they'd be bagging groceries.
Ouch, poor Death Grips.
What else would they do? What else would Zach do if he couldn't like play drums and produce that crazy shit, right? Would he do session work for people? Like they wouldn't hire him. He's too wild of a player. Like he's not like, he didn't even take traditional drum lessons. He doesn't really do that. Like I watched them play it. I saw them live and I was just like, that dude he plays weirder than any drummer. I've seen a lot of drummers. He plays weird. And that's like, you can't hire that guy to come in and like, hey, you know, fucking like, One Direction is that, you know, we're tracking drums on this new Harry Styles song, and we need a drummer. Like you're not going to hire that. And no, not in a million years will he even be on the one. He won't be the 1,000th person on the list, right? But in the context of what he actually does, it's spectacular. It's one of the best versions of that thing that I've ever heard. So that, like, I think what I'm getting to is the fact that the community, like because of the long tail, I know this is very convoluted.
It's a very complex sort of ecosystem that I feel like musicians and fans are still yet to fully understand. So actually we should talk about NFTs. Because, and my friends right now are groaning and be like, no, Mike, not the NFTs again. Here's the thing. Like, I think
the bad side of what has evolved is that number one, algorithms are too strong. So the algorithms that put music in front of you on Spotify and in your feeds everywhere are just basically they're analyzing what you've already clicked on, what you already like, and just feeding you new, like more of that, like even watered down versions of the same thing. And if your favorite things are like, if your favorite thing is Bjork, then that's like, maybe that's an interesting thing you get out of that algorithm. But if your favorite thing is Ariana Grande so far, like that's the thing that you love the most, it has plenty of opportunity to feed you like deader and colder versions of that thing. And that's not good. Like that's why the biggest stuff that if you look at when I look at the hits, like those, I hate those charts. I never look at those like top 100s and, hottest on the planet and hottest in the country lists. Cause when I do look at them, it's depressing. It looks like the AI is like, just like creating and serving you like more McDonald's Happy Meals. And that type of music actually makes me really sad because it does feel like those people had an opportunity maybe to do something that's more artistically fulfilling, and they aren't. They're doing what just makes money. Conversely, on the other side of the equation, the fans of those things who actually like that stuff, I think that it teaches them that everything really is just about money and marketing. That's sad too, because then here's what I experience. I put out a thing and I have a different versus that thing that I was just describing. I have a different balance between art and commerce, right? I do care about commerce. I don't want to just make an art record because that doesn't feel good to me. And I don't want to make just a sellable record. That doesn't feel good to me. So I try and find a nice balance that does feel good to me. And when I put that thing out, all those people who are so used to everybody just thinking about like what sells. You even talk about what sells all the time on your things, I think.
If the commercial appeal of a record or, its success is worth noting in a review, yeah, I'll bring it up, sure.
But I feel you even talk about like intention in the studio. Like this artist was writing this song and they did this because it's on trend and sells well. That's the thing that critics
sometimes
discuss
it's
all the
really
time.
apparent, but yeah, sure.
You think it's apparent though. That's a thing. Like I feel like sometimes the hard thing about when you release a record is people will see decisions through the lens like, oh, I'm listening to this person's song. They did that because it's on trend. They did that because it sells, as opposed to they like the way that sounds. Like that, well, I feel like that's on artist side is a little
ultimately
unfair.
It can be both. And honestly, like with the way that a lot of music is promoted and algorithmically disseminated now, it becomes a little more apparent, especially knowing that platforms like Spotify are recommending things not just based on the metrics of one artist or another, but also the way that these pieces of sound are being analyzed by the platform sonically too, so it's through that you can only come to the conclusion in a lot of cases that when you see a certain producer popping off and then you see that producer popping up on 100 different tracks with the same exact sound, or a certain rapper or artist is popping off, which is why, over the course of the next year, you see a million DaBaby features, knowing that when you punch DaBaby into Spotify, his features are going to pop up.
That sounded like in Spotify.
Sorry. Pop up in Spotify, that his features are going to pop up as well. So whatever song that you've had him featured on is going to whatever streams trickle down from those searches are going to pop onto your track too. And
that's certainly true.
And look,
what I'm saying is because that's
column
true.
A and column B. You can like how it sounds, but also simultaneously be driven. But because look, at the end of the day, I talk about things because I like talking about them, but simultaneously, I know that certain things I talk about are going to get more views than others. I know that certain things are going to be more searchable than others. That's why I'm going to, talk about the new Death Grips record when it comes out. Yeah, I love Death Grips. I obviously have given their records a lot of positive reviews over the years, but simultaneously, I know that Death Grips review is going to get like 300, 400,000 views. So I have to review it. You know what I mean? Even because I think in a perfect or an idyllic world, if that Death Grips record came out and it sucked, I could say, well, it sucks, so I don't even have to talk about it. Why would I waste my time? Just say fuck it. You know, just don't talk about it at all. But in the world that we're in, where everything that you do, no matter how much you love doing it, has to make money or you starve to death, you're going to talk about that record that sucks regardless, because if it brings in the views, it brings in the views. Now, I mean,
what was your first concert?
What was my first concert? Like my first like concert of a band that you would know, or like concert I'm at like a, you know, I'm at like a grubby VFW and like metalcore bands are playing.
That was like, your first. That was the first show you went to, and like, I'm watching music live.
I would say like the first concert I went to was like with a family friend who, him and some buddies of his had an extra ticket to a Tesla concert. And
sick.
I just like, what?
Did you know Tesla at that point?
80s hair metal. I was listening to your music at the time that I went to that show. So I didn't know shit about Tesla. So
wait, so this is like 2000 or whatever?
This is like early 2000s, maybe like late 90s. So this is like...
And you went to a Tesla concert at that time? Like, that's a really weird concert. I didn't even know Tesla was playing at that time. It was like a
weird comeback kind of thing. That's all I remember.
Who did they play with?
I have
Do you know?
Idea. I was just barely into my teens. I don't remember. So, like, I went to see that.
So what was the first concert you went to that you were like, you were really
the first
excited?
Concert I went to where it was actually like a voluntary kind of thing was, you know, like I'm going to this on my own with like some of my friends. You know, over in CT, there's not a lot of, well, I mean, there's a little more now, but back in the day, there were no all ages venues, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
you know, I was into music well before I was 18. So a lot of the first shows that I had ever gone to were just like, you know, VFW shows where some local metal bands or metalcore bands. I mean, you know, over in New England, the metalcore scene was huge. Hatebreed is big over here. So, you know, there were a lot of bands sort of that stripe, local bands that had more of a, like a Tool or a Korn kind of sound, you know what I mean? So there were a lot of local bands in the area that had that vibe. And, you know, every once in a while I just go to these very like maybe 100 cap kind of shows in Waterbury area, you know, like a few other neighboring cities and towns. If someone could rent out a VFW for like $50 and then charge people like $3, a couple dollars at the door, and, you know, just to like cover the cost of having the whole thing. Those were definitely like some of my first shows that I had, you know, gone to.
So did you play an instrument?
I played bass myself. I still play bass, you know, myself. Yeah.
You still play. Wait, you have a band?
No, I'm not in a band.
You just play.
If
some people have bands. I mean, like, them? Look. Yeah, 100%. Please tell me more. What's your SoundCloud?
No, I don't have a band, but I've been playing bass since I was like 14.
I had, okay, just to like level the playing field here, I had an obsession. My three, I think the three first things groups that I loved were Beastie Boys, Run DMC, and Bon Jovi.
Hell yeah.
Bon Jovi, for some reason, I don't know what it was about that I liked. I had all these weird like things that I liked growing up that did connect to what I later ended up doing. Like my first show that I ever went to see live was it was a really big show. It was like at this like amphitheater. And my friend Mark, who I actually started my band with, it was me and Mark started a band called Zero. Well before that, we went to our first concert together. and his dad had to chaperone us because we were little. He had to drive us there and sit at the show with us. We saw Anthrax, Public Enemy, Primus, and a group called Young Black Teenagers who were all white.
Time. Like, can I just talk about like how much of an embarrassment is that your first show just like blew my first show out of the fucking water? Like Anthrax
like,
and Public Enemy, just fuck you, dude. Like that's
Ice-T was in the crowd. I got his autograph.
I feel like you started that story really casually, but subtly it's just a flex. Like I feel like you're just like.
I don't know, man, because Anthrax is not my favorite band.
But they're one of the big four. Like look,
they're one of the big four.
Like in the grander scheme of things, is Slayer is Slayer my favorite band? No, but I went to go see that farewell tour because it's Slayer. So I mean, it's one of the big four. You have to be psyched about that.
That is what it feels like. I'm like lying, first of all, because it's like, oh yeah, my favorite things when I joked with our band. They never made this connection. But once I said it, they were so mad at me for pointing this out. I was like, you guys, we were the 2000s version of Bon Jovi. Let that sink in, because it's true. It's 100% true. And people can fucking hate on them. And it was like pop, hair metal, blah, blah, blah. It's like, guys, we accidentally became Bon Jovi. And we saw Bon Jovi. It was so great. I saw Bon Jovi at this thing. We were playing like an iHeart Music Festival or whatever. And Chester and I and Dave, I want to say, found out that Bon Jovi was playing the parking lot. They were playing this huge, like, it was not a small thing. Like, it sounds like parking lot shows. It's not. It was a huge thing. Everybody at the hotel had to listen to it. It was like right outside their windows. The lights were crazy, shining into your room. It might have been lasers. I don't even know. And so it was very aggressive. It was in everybody's face. And we were like, well, so obviously we have to go. And John Bon Jovi did this thing in the middle of it. They did this like it was like a written like bit where he's like, hey, Richie. Yeah, John. You remember when we used to take the girls out to the back of the parking lot, and like they're in the middle of a song and they're doing this monologue, and then Richie busts into like one of his whoa, whoa, whoa guitar parts, and John Bon Jovi sets his microphone aside and turns around and shakes his ass at the crowd. Like leather pants. He's 60 years old. I don't have a fucking idea how old he is. He's shaking his ass in great shape. Fine. But still, that was the moment you put the like Linkin Park is the new Bon Jovi, and then I watched Bon Jovi do that, and I'm like, oh God, is that what we have to do now? Like, is that where we're going? Is this where we're going to end up? Is playing a parking lot, it's actually very big parking lot show, shaking our asses?
It's going to take a different shape. I mean, I think, over the next 15 years or so, you'll definitely be in a TikTok video or two or some similar platform, just like,
I have to find. Wait, are you on TikTok?
I'm not dancing on there. I'll say that. Not yet.
Yeah, neither am I.
Not yet.
Well, that's actually, I did one where it was a kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it wasn't like one of those.
That's what everyone says until
whatever.
It's serious.
Am I wrong? Okay, you and the fans watching this, sound off. Tell me this. Tell me if I'm crazy.
We'll tell you.
There's a new, I believe that there's a new, that kids, especially girls, teens, and what do you call it, tweens, are learning facial choreography from TikTok. They are making specific, if you watch those videos, those dance videos in particular, they are doing specific tongue to the side of the teeth, looking to the sides, winking, like all of these facial movements that are 100% unnatural, totally not a thing you would ever do, but they do them, every single one of them, they do them the same moves every time. And once you start to notice it, I called it the TikTok tongue. Watch for the TikTok tongue. Please give me credit too. If you notice it and you go, I saw it, it's happening every time I watch a TikTok video, we get TikTok tongue.
Everyone said,
but I promise you'll notice it.
People are saying they're noticing it. People are saying you're right. But honestly,
TikTok tongue.
I'm not really, I'm not really surprised by this because, look, people learn things from other people. And what does the internet give you other than overexposure to other people? And when you're seeing the same patterns repeated again and again and again and again, especially like through successful types of media, like you're going to pick up on those nuances. Like, have you ever seen one of those? I mean, ultimately, this is nothing new. Did you ever see like one of those GIFs where it compiles all the pictures of Paris Hilton and she's making the exact same face in every photo? And not only that, but she knows exactly the angle to place her face at.
Yeah.
And then it's just like hundreds of pictures speeding by, but it's the same exact face every time. You know, between that and like, you know, the Instagram or what back in the day, you remember this, back in the day, they used to call them MySpace angles. You know, but between all of that, I mean, you know, what we're seeing now with TikTok is just like the alpha version of, you know, it's version 6.0 at this point.
Yeah. They don't, the thing is now, in the same way that like, once a phenomenon like becomes part of the zeitgeist, it becomes just a norm. Like you know, back in, I don't know what you said, MySpace, like a long time ago, I bet that when they noticed that, it was like, oh, it's kind of cringy. They wouldn't have said that then, but it is. And then now it's like, that's just the norm. Like your average person who's on Zoom with their workmates all the time this year, they know, and they are fine with like working their angles, right? Like they know like, oh, your average person might have their lighting kind of dialed for their Zooms, and they like know to like, you know, that this angle's a good angle
in every
for their
single
picture.
video that I do, I sit in a certain way, a certain side of my face.
Oh, so you're doing it
as well? I'm aware of it as well.
Are you doing makeup too?
But I know from which angle my head looks the roundest, and I do that one. I go for the roundest angle.
Did the Melon thing come from you or come from
the
fans?
Melon thing actually came from a beef. It's actually really funny.
I don't know this. Is this stupid for me
it's
to?
Not stupid. I mean, I'll talk about the origins of the Melon, and then I have to ask you one more question before I think we send you out. But there is this electronic music producer by the name of Zombie who, prior to what transpired that I'm about to explain, was notorious for beefing with everybody on Twitter, fellow musicians, journalists, so on and so forth. And honestly, like considering my profile at the time, it was already in my head that it would only be a matter of time before this guy said something about me. And I reviewed his new project at the time. This is like very, very early 2010s. And he just like dropped this whole screed of tweets and, was just like asking if I'd ever been to the UK and just verbally attacking me. And then it all ended with him just like calling me a fucking melon. Now, ultimately, the response to this, because the rant was so ridiculous, was to just like everybody was just flaming him and making fun of him and really just like, attacking the fact that this is like your millionth rant about a random person who doesn't like your music or you don't like. Just get the fuck off the internet. So he just like deleted all the tweets and just like kind of disappeared for a moment. It was like almost over as fast as it had begun. But immediately afterwards, everybody started calling me Melon in an endearing way. Because like, yeah, you're a melon, because it was such a ridiculous point in the rant that it just like kind of stuck. So people just like started calling me Melon in a friendly way. Right. And it started with like a very small subsection of my audience, but then other people just started seeing other people do it, and they're like completely disconnected from the origins of the whole thing, and they're like, they must be calling him Melon because it's funny, or maybe that's the shape of his head or something, So now it's just sort of like it endured for years and years and years. There's even a line of shirts that I sold where it's just like, me and a bunch of melons and everything. And it's just stuck. I even have a melon emote on Twitch. It's just a part of the brand. Yeah. It's just a part of the brand.
Yeah.
And
that's how Twitch
fun.
Works.
So let me ask you before you head out, because I would feel bad not asking you, about this directly, just because it is part of the reason why this interview happened in the first place. But you dropped this new single, Happy Endings. Would you be able to go a little bit into what made this track come together, and kind of the frame of mind creatively you were in with this track, and like aesthetically what you were going for? I mean, I'm not going to come through here and accuse you of he's just sounding like this to stay trendy. But, it is clear though that, you have an ear to the ground of what is like working and what is popular, and you're embodying that yourself as much as you can, like artistically in a way that feels authentic and true to the genres of music that we know you to dabble in.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you, I'll give you a little extra color, that I haven't been afforded the opportunity to do before. So we talked about doing the instrumental tracks last year. I was on Twitch. I've been on Twitch 5 days a week. I go from 10 to noon these days, and I was doing instrumentals all last year. But the rest of the day, like I'm kind of open, right? Like kind of exploring different things. And like I said, I've been in this like research and development kind of phase, like just trying different things, co-writing with some people. A lot of that wasn't really working. So a lot of kind of almost like, so it was like a little bit of like a little bit discouraging because I felt like there was a lot of air balls. And then on Twitch though, that was really fun. I did a program, like it's weird because the momentum of everything kind of picked up all at once. At the beginning of this year, I started a program, which actually I want you to pay attention to. I'm going to tell you about this because I think you'll like some of the stuff. Eventually, you won't like everything, of course, but I started a program on my Twitch channel called, the fans called it Shinoda Produce Me, where basically I was taking like fan submissions and vocalists that I'd find on like Instagram and TikTok and wherever, and just hitting them up with a DM and being like, can I produce your song? And I've produced now over a dozen tracks by just random fans and artists. And some of them are so talented, man. I'm telling you, like, if the folks watching like don't know where to start or want to check it out, I think some of the community highlights have been Ben Kessler's track, Wax Wayne, Kintsuku, like I think start with those and get a sense of it, and you can find them on my channel and whatever. Those guys they haven't all put out their songs yet, but they're going to, because it's brand new. And while I was doing that, I think just the like momentum of doing that, I was starting to write some cooler stuff because of the repetition. It's like that 10,000 hours thing. I'm starting to write stuff like, it even forced me to get outside of my own concepts of like who I am and what I do. And I wrote a song with Sam Ronson and Pete Nappy and Upsall. The funny thing about that was just that Upsall had like two people had been like, hey, have you heard of this girl? And I was like, why have two random people like mentioned her to me? And we got together, we literally wrote the song on a Zoom, and it sat in a hard drive. And like a month or two later, this like guy from my publishing company was like, hey, Mike, we don't know each other, but like this song that you did back a little while ago with Sam and Pete, what's happening with that song? And I was like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm just in my weird little cave, like making stuff every day. And he's like, you need to pay attention to this song. It's like, I love this song. And I was like, yeah, I like it too. I like a lot of things I do. It's just that I feel like nobody else likes them or something. Like, it's like, I just make stuff. I don't fucking know anymore. And it broke through that it was that momentum piece that like, it broke through. It was an element of self-doubt and an element of like, just not knowing what to do. And all of a sudden there was clarity. And so we dug into the song, we wrapped it up. It definitely is in the track. You can hear like the fact that it's very collaborative, and that specifically lyrically, it's all about how shitty 2020 was. And like 2021 is like, I just feel like we're still like locked up in quarantine. Like things are starting to like open up bit by bit, but it's almost feels like the last week of school where you can't wait for it to be over. Like, when is this shit going to be over? It's almost here, but it's not, you know? And so like, that's really where it's that anxious, frenetic, like excitement about this moment in time, I think. It's a long wandering story, but that's the whole thing.
Well, thank you for the description. No, I mean, and I mean, that's certainly that tension and that sense of waiting and wanting is definitely felt in the track, no doubt. You know, I think one more thing that I want to ask you, you know, to sort of end things off, I think this will, you know, be a cool thing to coast down on, is you know, you were talking earlier about the 20th anniversary, like the, you know, the re-release of Hybrid Theory, and how, you know, essentially at this point, we've done that, we've been there, we've done everything that we could do with that. You know, but in a way, and I'm sure that you understand this from a macro picture, like, this record was huge, and it's become a part now of this like overarching cycle where something turns 20 or 15 or 25 years old, and in a way it sort of like becomes classic. You know, it's a part of like the cultural canon, and it's never going away in a way. And, you know, thinking back to being a young music fan who maybe looked up to certain artists and records that way, and being familiar with that. I mean, as a huge music fan yourself, I'm sure you're still pretty, you know, reverent about a lot of things that you hear even these days. Like, does it feel odd to think of your own music in that way now? Like having reached that pinnacle and knowing that there's like leagues of people out there who just kind of view it through that lens?
I mean, there was a point at which I was a little bit I felt awkward about the idea that somebody would not just like look up to us, but like that it's almost like simultaneously like the reverence for the stuff. And by the way, not just that record. Like, I know, 1,000 Suns, for example, which was our fourth record. It wasn't as commercially successful as the earlier ones because nothing could be. That would be impossible. It was a very commercially successful record. However, it was very polarizing. It got 1 or 5 stars by everybody. So we ended up with 3-star ratings all over the board because it's like half the people hated it with all of their heart and soul. And now we're at a point where if you ask the average person who's relatively familiar with the band what their favorite record is, a lot of them say that one. It's changed. Like, the whole relationship with the band has changed. People go like, man, that was like the first album I ever bought. That's how I learned to play guitar. And then I moved on to like guitar that was harder. Like, that guitar was so, and that was part of the thing. It's like, yeah, we were, you know, Brad could actually play much more difficult stuff, but we loved how that sounded, and we wanted to make stuff that a kid who couldn't really play guitar would be like, yeah, let's play this riff. I appreciate that. Like, being older, I love the idea. As I kind of said before, I do love the idea of being in a position to maybe be a good, you know, teacher or role model if I know something that somebody else doesn't know. Also to be a student, and like we had talked about, you know, I'm thinking of like 100 Gex, or like, I don't know if you know, you probably know all these folks, but like Toby Wigway, 070 Shake, like XIX, Terrell Hines, who is just barely getting started. Like, listening to some of their music and meeting some of them. I remember I had like a really interesting conversation with a couple of the guys from Brockhampton, where that thing that we're talking about is like, was at the center of our relationship, that the Dom was like he loves Linkin Park. And I was like, that's so crazy. Like, I would have never guessed. How would I know? Like, your music sounds nothing like us. And he was pulling to learn things from me. But while we were doing that, having those conversations, like, I was learning from him. Like, they record most of their stuff in a wildly short period of time. We've never done that. I've never experienced that. And because I talked to him, I was like, oh, like, how does that work? Like, you have to really be free to like make snap decisions and don't overthink it and just go and like commit. And he's like, yeah, man, like this is what it's like. This is how you have to feel, right? And you can learn like both ways. It's a two-way street, and it's really, I think that's really beautiful. Like that's really fun. That's one of my favorite parts about being an artist in my position right now.
Well, dude, I appreciate you coming through and just being such an open book and not tearing me the fuck apart. I do appreciate that as well. And
you don't deserve that. You don't deserve that. Even though there was a part of me that was tempted to do it just for fun. No, you like, I know that you're passionate about what you do. And if you didn't give negative reviews, then it wouldn't be worth watching.
That's the biggest compliment I think anyone's ever given me. And I'm not even lying.
It doesn't mean you can't be wrong.
True.
I mean, it's just a matter of opinion. I can disagree with you all day.
That's true.
But regardless, you have a job to do.
And so do you. And I love that you're doing it. And I think that, as a musician who's embracing the digital age and, the Twitch platform, I mean, look, in my opinion, you and what Linkin were doing was creatively ahead of the curve 20 years ago. And I feel like you're still kind of at that point now. You're still looking forward. You're still like, where are things moving? Where are the musicians? Where are the music fans? And, you're heading in that direction. And I think that's fantastic. And, I think that, stands to your point earlier where you were saying, well, you could be pursuing things that are trendy because you like it, because it's good. And I think that also speaks to music, which I think a lot of us forget about because of how commercialized and commodified it is. But music and all art is just a form of communication. And while, there is that element of the musical process, of the writing process, where you're either alone or you're alone with the band and you're thinking up ideas, you're recording concepts, even though that is less lonely than it used to be thanks to Twitch. Still at the end of the day, when you release that music, when you put that out there, you want to communicate. It doesn't feel great to communicate with no one. So sometimes the easiest way to get in on that process is to do it in a language that other people understand or are familiar with. If you want to get in on that conversation quickly and efficiently and easily, it doesn't necessarily make the most sense to, approach people with like some kind of like experimental Scott Walker piece where you're like, and just like, busting out like bars about farts and shit, which I love that record. I love Bish Bosh. But like, if you want to communicate with the largest amount of people or like, a considerable amount of people, that's like not the best way to start your conversation. It seems like you creatively are sensitive to, sort of that part of the process. Sure, it's easy to look at it as just like a commercial venture because the way that all music is sort of like commercialized, especially in this long tail kind of era, because the moment you put something up on Spotify, it's making money whether you like it or not. But still, it's an act of communication. You're engaging in that communication, and thank you for doing it, and we will look forward to seeing you continue to do it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Have a good one.